I am not one for shortcuts, but if I believed there was one key to happiness, one key to success, one key to confidence, it is integrity. Now, if you stick around until the end, I'm going to tell you the personal story of how I was faced with my own integrity. It was like a mirror to me to see the things that other people could see and I was completely blind to. Spoiler alert, it did not feel great in the moment, but it did lead to greatness later. But first, I want to tell you the story of how I learned this concept of integrity. A coach of mine, his name is Traver Bohem, who you should absolutely check out. He's got 2 incredible TED Talks that we'll link in the comments, and he is the leader of a men's movement called the Uncivilized Nation. Now, he explained it to me this way. Every morning, you wake up, and you have this kind of huge bag of water. And the water inside that bag represents your integrity. And whoopsie poopsies, you woke up, but you feel a little bit sluggish today. And so you know what you're going to do? You're going to go ahead and hit the snooze button just once or twice or 72 times, whatever. And boom, that action pokes a hole in the bag of water of your integrity. And suddenly your integrity starts to leak. Now, it may not seem like a big deal to hit the snooze button, but watch how this continues to stack. When you finally do get out of bed, you realize, oh my goodness, I'm running a little bit behind. And although you did promise your spouse that you were going to take out the trash that morning, you know that you don't have that time. So you leave the house without fulfilling your responsibility to take out the trash. And there's another poke. And your integrity is leaking even more. Now, remember, you're running behind, so you don't have time to create a healthy breakfast for yourself, even though you made the commitment to yourself that you were absolutely going to eat healthier this week. Boom, there's another poke in your integrity. You show up late with your not-so-good-for-you breakfast that you got at the discount dollar taco shop. Do not recommend that place, by the way. And you also showed up late to work. Boom. That's another poke in your integrity. And all day throughout the day, you have these little pokes in your integrity that spill your integrity out slowly but surely. And the more you lack in your integrity, the less that other people are going to be able to trust you. But most importantly, the less you trust yourself. Now, here's why this matters, especially to a leader and a speaker. By the way, I consider leaders and speakers one and the same. I always say that there's 2 types of public speaking nerves. The first is roller coaster nerves, like, oh my goodness, this is going to be so exciting, but it's going to be so scary.
But it's going to be so exciting, but it's going to be so scary. But it's going to be so exciting, but it's going to be so scary.
It's this duality of feelings that you have when you are facing an audience with a message that matters. The second type of speaking nerves are what I call consequential or lying nerves. It's that feeling you get in your stomach when you know you're lying, when you know you're not being completely truthful with someone, including yourself. You have this sense that you might be found out. That's the fear that I'm talking about. And whether we're honest with ourselves or we're not, we all have cracks and leaks in our integrity. And that matters, especially when we're leading and communicating. So let's define integrity. Integrity is being your word, communicating change, and owning your mistakes. So let's talk about the first concept, being your word. Don Miguel Ruiz explains this in the 4 Agreements. He says, be impeccable with your word. All it really boils down to is, are you doing what you said you are going to do? Very, very simple concept, but definitely not easy. Think about how your life would change if you met every single commitment you made to yourself and to others. If you are impeccable with your word, you have to clarify with yourself what you are willing to commit to, how and when. Just that alone gives you the boundaries and the contexts to be able to commit to what you know is best for you and others. The second concept is communicating change. Listen, as much as I want to be impeccable with my word, I recognize that life lifes. I could have full intentions of getting somewhere at a specific time, and I could get a flat tire, or plans might change, or whatever might happen. But there's 3 key aspects of communicating change. Number 1, communicate that change as much as possible with a reasonable amount of time. Asking someone a minute before you're supposed to meet if you can reschedule isn't really communicating change. Second, be specific and clear with the change that you want to make. Don't leave things open-ended, but especially if you're changing one of your commitments, identify how you are still going to meet that commitment in a different timeline. Finally, don't go into stories. Don't go into excuses. Don't go into reasons. Simply make the request. Now, those reasons may be valid and valuable, but in the time of negotiation, keep that to a bare minimum. Finally, the most difficult aspect of integrity is owning your mistakes. Look, I hate making mistakes. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I've let people down. It makes me feel like I've let myself down. And the problem is that most of the time we don't know how to own our mistakes, especially when we're doing so in a professional context. So here's a framework to help you out. When you're owning your mistakes, follow these 4 steps. Number 1, acknowledge the specific infraction, meaning acknowledge specifically what you did wrong or how you fell short of your commitment. It can be as simple as, I'm late. I acknowledge that I am late. I am sorry that I am late. Second, identify what was in the gap. Now, when I say identify what was in the gap, what I'm really saying is, what didn't you do that you could have done to make sure that you met this commitment? This is not a list of excuses. You can't say, well, I was late because this jerk cut me off in traffic and then he flipped me off and then I got really angry and then I pulled over and I called my mom. That all may be true, but we don't need to have the story as to why it was true. You can simply say, I was late because I didn't give myself enough time to deal with the traffic. Third, acknowledge the impact it has on that person. Hey, your time is very valuable, and I realize that by being late, I'm not only disrespecting your time, but I'm also cutting the time that we have short. And finally, recommit. The phrase that I like to use is count on me. From here on out, you can count on me being on time, in fact, being early to each of our meetings. But here's the most important part. If you recommit, make sure that you're in integrity next time you have that opportunity. So all of those concepts of integrity, I believe, will absolutely radically change your life. And it will also be a very powerful and very difficult mirror for you to look at. Here's how I was faced with the concept of integrity. About 6 years ago, my life was a mess. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know it. I mean, I knew my life was a mess. I could feel my life a mess, but I was pointing at every single person, situation, context around me as an excuse as to why I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. Now, there's one particular day where I was really upset and really emotional about a particular situation, and I decided to address the situation in the most healthy way possible. I decided to call my friends and inform them that we were going out to heavily drink. And that's exactly what we did. We Ubered downtown. We started with shots. I think it was probably past noon, maybe, and I continued all through the night. I hung out with my friends, I met new friends, and I even ran into my neighbor who was a good friend of mine. Now, the next day, here's what happened. I ran into that neighbor that I ran into the night before, and she expressed to me great joy. She said, wow, Eric, I haven't seen you that happy in such a long time. And externally, I know why she said that. I did have a great time the night before. Externally, I was in my full charismatic, promoter, just energetic, positive self. But I was really masking the pain inside of me. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. The fact that I was hurting so much inside and yet able to fake it so well on the outside. While I didn't have the language for it then, I do now. My integrity was so misaligned, so out of whack that I couldn't even identify it in myself. Now, whatever your faith is, whatever philosophy you subscribe to, I'm a firm believer that you don't always get what you want, but you always get what you need. And I'm also a firm believer that lessons come at the right time that we're open for them. That day, I happened to go for a walk to clear my head. I was scrolling through Instagram, just kind of trying to take my mind off of everything. And a friend of 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 a friend had posted something about a podcast. And this podcast was about concept of integrity. Don't worry, I'm going to make sure to link it in the comments. And this podcast that featured my future coach, Traver Bohem, discussed this concept of how we get to be internally aligned with ourselves, aligned with our truth in order to be truthful to others. And the podcast continued to talk about how one way that the two people on the podcast stay in integrity is that they don't drink. And that was the moment that I took the first step into integrity. And I decided to stop drinking because up until that point, I told myself the story that drinking was a support to my anxiety, was a support to my depression. I was pretending not to know that it was harming me physically and mentally. And lo and behold, as soon as I started the path of integrity, every other aspect of my life began to align as well. Now, I'm not going to claim that once you're in integrity, you live a perfect life. In fact, the path of integrity is a journey, one that you have to continue to adjust to align to, and to evaluate. Now, this is something I'm going to be talking a lot about on this channel, so make sure that you hit subscribe so that you're up to date on all concepts of integrity and how you can align yourself with your integrity so that you can be your best version of yourself and the best version of yourself for others. As always, make sure that you come off mute and speak up your story. We'll see you next time.